Hello everyone, my name is Danny and today I'll be giving a overview of the different roles in the video game industry and what you need to do to get into these roles. An overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'll start with an intro of myself and then we will start with the different roles in the industry. This is not an exhaustive list of roles, but the most common roles in the industry. And lastly, we'll end with some common CV and interview tips and questions. So a little about myself. I'm originally from Taiwan, but I came to New Zealand at a really young age. I lived in New Zealand for most of my life before moving to Montreal. I spent 4 years studying Bachelor of Engineering, Software Engineering, and graduated in 2012. Then continued with a Master's of Computer Science for 1 year and graduated in 2013. I landed my first job with a tech company in Auckland called Rush Digital Interactive. And throughout the time I spent at Rush, I got to work mostly on porting different Disney and well-known mobile projects to the Windows platform. I also had the chance to make our own driving game and port Path of Exile to Xbox One. After 4 years at Rush, I decided to try and apply overseas to a big AAA company such as Ubisoft, Eidos, Warner Brothers, BioWare. In 2017, I got an offer from Ubisoft Montreal and I moved overseas to work on the Far Cry brand. So since then, I've worked on Far Cry 5, Far Cry 6, before moving to Mihoyo last year as a senior gameplay programmer. So there are a lot of roles in the industry, and the most common ones are designers, animators, programmers, managers, and testers. There are other more specialized roles, but we won't have enough time to talk about them today. So first up, designers. I spoke with two of my past colleagues, Paul on the left, who started out as a level designer and is now a creative director of his own studio, and Guillaume on the right, who is a lead gameplay designer at Ubisoft Toronto. So in general, there are two types of designer in the industry. One is usability designers, so you're looking at UI designers, and the others is game designers, such as level designers and gameplay designers. Today we'll be talking about mostly game designers. So game designers are in charge of the fun factor in games. So they have a good knowledge of the current gaming trends and have the ability to come up with new ways to play or interact with the game world. They're also in charge with tweaking the mechanics to make sure the game is balanced and the player feels good while playing it. Game designers are also required to write design documents and to pitch their ideas to help communicate the design to the rest of the team, who's going to be the one that's implementing it. So there are some skills that are required with most, if not all, of the job within the game industry, and designers are no exception. So these common skills are, having a passion for video games, obviously. If you need to work in the video game industry, you need to have passion. And the ability to work within a team environment, which means, being able to communicate with different types of people and discuss clearly and respectfully about games. So designers needs to work a lot with different departments to bring their vision to life. So it's really important that designers are comfortable with socializing with people and have strong written and oral communication skills in order to write design documents and to communicate the design to the other departments. Designers should have a good understanding of the basic of game design and a rough idea of how things work in video games. So for example, how does a game detect that the bullet has hit an enemy? The high level idea would be through raycasts from the gun hitting the collider of an enemy actor or pawn. This is important because without knowledge of how things work, it slows down the design process, as the design process needs to be validated by other departments to ensure the design is feasible. So if the designer has these high-level concepts already, it's a lot easier to, validate the design by themselves. It is also important because it gives you an idea of how complex a new feature would be and who you need to talk to. And usually this will come from a formal education or from past work experiences. It is also important for design to have some sort of basic scripting and programming knowledge, be it visual scripting such as blueprints or actual coding experiences such as Python or C# with Unity. This is because given the present game engine technology, non-programmers now have access to visual scripting tools and are expected to be able to prototype or implement features on their own, as this can greatly speed up the iteration process without having programmers to implement these features, which is what happened in the past. Designers need to be able to take criticism well and not feel offended. Because literally everyone within the company can comment on their design, and this is something that's quite common where as a gameplay programmer myself, I worked really closely with designers, and we usually discuss about the design that's proposed. Designers also need to be flexible in both being able to work with various tools and change things on the fly. So what I mean by that is almost every studio has their own customized engine, and it's important that the designer can pick up these engines and learn quickly how to use them. Designers also need to be flexible in terms of their design. So often there could be different situations such as tech limitations or budget or time constraints, which means that certain features may be cut. And so for some of the designs, they need to accommodate these changes due to the missing feature. So for example, if you built a level that's based on a grappling design, a grappling feature, however, that feature was cut, so now that whole level design needs to change since that was a core mechanic. Designers should also have a good analytical and problem-solving skills in order to anticipate potential problems of introducing certain designs into the game and how it can be avoided or mitigated. So for example, introducing a shield for the player in Far Cry 6. The shield cannot cover the player's entire body and head, or else it will block the camera view. So what happened was there was a risk that AI may still hit the player even though the shield is equipped. So to solve this problem, we decided to make sure the AI only aims at the shield when it's equipped on the player to give the illusion that the player is being protected. Lastly, designer is a creative role, and it requires them to come up with new ways of playing a game, which means they need to constantly be thinking outside the box and explore different possibilities to keep the players engaged. So if you want to be a designer, here are some tips and a list of things that you should have. You want to highlight the important info, such as your education, past experience, what you did, and what you were responsible for. If you don't have a formal game design training, it is important to have some real life experiences such as game jams or own projects that you've completed. If you won or received special achievement in any of the competitions, such as game jams, feel free to mention it because it's a good demonstration of your knowledge and skills. You also want to customize your CV to the company that you're applying to. For example, look at what games they make. Do you have any examples of similar games that you made? If you do, then it's a good idea to probably put those in the portfolio or your CV. Next up is the portfolio. So game designers have portfolios, and the idea is to prove to the company that you're applying for that you have the skill and knowledge. So this is the key to getting an interview. So what should you put in the portfolio? So you can put design docs from projects you've worked on, examples of game, doesn't need to be a completed product, just a demo will do. Even a failure of a demo, like something you launched but it didn't sell well, it shows that you've given it a go and that you tried, which is better than having nothing. So usually people do this by hosting a video screenshot on a website or on Google Drive, and also having a executable. So after getting a CV and portfolio and making the first cut, you will get a call for an interview. So a designer interview process involves 2 or 3 interviews depending on level. A good rule of thumb to remember is to demonstrate your knowledge and flexibility, such as having knowledge in multiple different genres or different engines or different platforms, for mobile, console, PC. The first interview is usually with HR, like with all the other departments, to see if you're a good fit for the team. Then you'll get a second interview, usually with a design lead or with or without a senior designer accompanying the design lead. This interview is usually to get an idea of your design knowledge and how you work. Generally, you always get a few questions discussing the details of your CV and portfolio, such as what did you find difficult about a particular project? What issues did you face in this project and how did you solve it? Afterwards, there would be some questions along the lines of what is your favorite game of all time? Or what games are you currently playing? Here, the interviewer is most likely trying to find out about what game you're interested in, if that is in line with the game you're interviewing for, or gauge if you'll be a good fit for the team. So following from that, for gameplay designers, you're likely to get some role-playing questions, such as you can play as Dog in Far Cry 7. Tell me what features and changes you make. Or if you could add a new weapon to Titanfall 2, what could it be? Why? Or even what games do you think have good 3Cs? For level designers, you might get questions like, what do you think of a trailer for a particular game of your choice? What excites you? What worries you? One example that Paul gave me was that he was shown a early trailer for BioShock Infinite, the one with the railing. So, they asked him what he worried about and what excited him the most. Or they could ask you, what do you think of a particular level of a particular game that's already been released? So for the last interview, you might get an interview with the directors and producers. In this interview, they would likely to discuss more about the processes and structure of the project, making sure you understand and are comfortable with how they work, such as, the review process. It is also common for designers to get a take-home test, either before the first interview or the second interview, but that really depends on company. For game designers, you may get a test to write a design document to create a new feature for an existing games. For LDs, it could be to design a level using a paper prototype in a top-down view for a game that's already released by the company. So regardless of which one you get, by the end of these interviews, they will make a decision about whether to give you an offer or not. So that's about it for designers. Next, we'll move on to animators. So animators, I spoke to my friend who's a lead technical gameplay designer, Alexi, as you can see in the top right corner. So there are 2 main types of animator, gameplay animator and cinematic animator. We'll be talking more about the gameplay animator, as cinematic animator is similar to a 3D movie animator and aren't game specific. So gameplay animators are the people who help give game assets its personality, to make them come to life through movements. They help make the game feel smooth, fun, and satisfying to play. For example, does this combo feel good to execute? Does controlling the character feel smooth, look and feel smooth and responsive? So like any other discipline, animators also need to work well within a team, as they work closely with other departments such as modelers, riggers, or programmers to achieve their tasks. The main skill that an animator needs is the ability to know how to animate, regardless of what software is being used, whether using Blender, 3ds Max, Motion Builder, Maya, or other animation software. For example, it is crucial to understand the 12 animation principles and knowing how to apply them at the right time, such as using anticipation and follow through to create natural movements. Animators should also be open to learning other ways of working, as the industry evolves faster and faster, newer and more efficient methods of doing things are discovered. This could greatly affect the quality of work and efficiency of an animator and improve the overall quality of the game. It is also good to have experiences with game engines and knowing how to export your animation from animation software and import it to a game engines, as it's also part of the animator's job. So having great attention to detail is one of the core skills of animators as well, as subtle differences between keyframes can have a great impact of how an animation feels and interpreted by the player. And it is also useful to have good problem solving skills for different scenarios, such as finding out solving animation bugs or broken scenes or incompatible rigs. So if all this sounds good to you and you want to pursue the job of an animator, below are the list of things that you need to apply for the position. So first, for CVs, it is important to list your education. If not, then real life experience is important. So what I mean by real life experiences is experience where you had to produce animations with deadlines and requests from other people. This is different from just having a hobby, for example, or animating in your own free time, as it means you will have the experience of working under pressure towards a deadline and having to make animations that aren't necessarily what you enjoy making, and producing work that could possibly be not 100% completed, but it's the best quality given the time frames. Next is you definitely want a portfolio for pursuing a job of an animator. Portfolio is just as important as the CV, just like for designers. The format is usually a video showcasing rendered animations delivered through a Vimeo link, Google Drive, YouTube, or websites, however you like. The video should reflect your knowledge of what gameplay animations are, as well as the type of game that you're applying for. So don't go putting every animation you worked on in the portfolio. Do your research on the company, the type of games they're making. For example, don't have a portfolio full of third-person animations when you're applying for a position of animator for a first-person shooter game. The video should showcase real gameplay animations. For example, for FPS games, stuff like weapon reloading, weapon firing, switching weapons. Keep the video short and concise. Less than 3 minutes is good, maximum 3 minutes. I'll say probably even 1 or 2 minutes is optimal. And always put your strongest work at the beginning and at the end, so you have a strong start and a lasting impression to the interviewer. Lastly, always ask for feedback for your portfolio, as it helps you improve your video, even if you don't get the call back for an interview. So if you've done everything right, with a bit of luck, you'll be called in for an interview. The interview process for animators are relatively straightforward compared to designers. They're mostly 1 to 2 interviews and also a possibility of a take-home test. The first interview is the typical HR interview, talking about your CV, your past experience, and the HR partner will present your CV to the production team. And if the production team likes what they see, you'll get a second interview, which is basically to see if you're a good fit for the team. You'll usually get the typical questions of what kind of games are you into? What's your favorite game? Why is that? It's also possible to get a take-home test that is likely to be a task that requires you to do some sort of animation. They will try and test your ability to iterate, measure how fast you animate and how well you receive criticism. So, for example, it's not uncommon for you to send your completed test, then get back some feedback, where you process the feedback and iterate on the animation a second time. If they want, they can throw in a curveball where they could give you a broken scene and ask you to fix it on top of making the animation. So after all this, a decision will be made on whether you'll receive an offer or not. Next, we'll move on to programmers. So I'm a gameplay programmer myself, so these are based on my own experiences. So there are many types of different programmers in the game industry. There's gameplay programmers, AI programmers, engine programmers, rendering programmers, UI programmers. Um, in general, programmers provide support to other departments. This can be to develop in-house tools to speed up iteration times for other departments, such as creating animation tools, texturing tools, or to build new gameplay features to help bring the designer's vision to life. Um, we provide low-level support to teams as they work most closely with game engines by modifying code and by making sure the performance of the game is at an acceptable level, usually making sure the memory budget is within the system limits and the frame rate is at least 30 frames per second. Because of the large amount of different specializations, they each require different specific knowledge. So in general, a programmer needs to know either C++ or C Sharp, since all game engines are written in C++ or C Sharp. For C Sharp, that's for Unity. Programmers usually have some sort of formal training, and from that, a good understanding of the following concepts: object-oriented programming, entity component system design, basics of performance, for example, how to measure performance and how to improve code for performance. As part of the job of programmers is to logically break down designs from designers into code implementations. They must be able to translate design requirements to code. Programmers should have at least some experience with at least one engine, which is a given if you made a game either for a finals project or by yourself with a few friends. Since there's so many different engines available for free right now, there really isn't any excuse. Programmers are the last line of defense for fixing any bugs found in the game, as they have access to the lowest level of the game engine. So having strong debugging skills are a must. Programmers also work with other departments to help implement changes to gameplay designs, so iteration skills are also good to have. Lastly, programmers need to have experience in Scrum and Agile programming, as it's the standard for the games industry. So if that sounds good to you and you want to be a programmer, here's what you would need for your CV and what you will get in an interview. So for a programmer CV, you'll want to list your formal education. If you don't have one, make sure you have the experiences to cover that. But it's definitely better to have a formal education, as this is a highly technical role. You would want to highlight any experiences in using any engines, Unreal, Unity, for example. Next would be to list any coding languages you know, along with the proficiency. So for example, C++, 8 years, C Sharp, 4 years, Python, 3 years, so on and so forth. Lastly, any other technical skills related to the position. For example, 3D programmers could be knowledge of HLSL shaders, the rendering pipeline. For AI programmers, knowledge of machine learning or pathfinding algorithms, as well as any past project experiences. So once your CV has been seen by the company and they decide you might be a good fit for the position, you'll be invited in for a programmer's interview. Programmer's interview is a different beast compared to the other department interview process, as it contains a technical interview. Usually there is 2 to 3 rounds of interview where you'll get around 2 technical interviews. Like other interview process, the first one's usually with a HR talking about the CV and to gauge if you're a good fit for a particular team. Second and third interview are usually includes technical test, which could be either a online test or a phone technical test. So first technical tests are usually questions about your previous projects, such as how you implement certain features, what problems you faced, and how to solve them, as well as basic programming knowledge, such as what is a stack, what is the heap, explain what is memory fragmentation, or my favorite, what is 2 to the power of 10? Or or explain what is inheritance. There's also possibility of giving hypothetical questions, such as if you have a large amount of objects to update each frame, what sort of containers would you use and why? So these questions are there to kind of gauge how much knowledge you have to what depth. And if they determine that you've got the right knowledge and the right skills, you'll move on to the next technical test, which will be more advanced, where you'll get coding questions, which you have to write code without using an IDE, such as on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, or in Notepad if you're doing online interviews. So example question could be, write some code to detect if an enemy is in front of you. Or something like write code to allocate a line memory. And you would need to do this live on a medium that's not an IDE. So other than that, some companies also give timed online tests or take-home tests. For take-home tests, it usually involves a few different exercises. For example, I got one before that was to code a A-star path finding algorithm, given some boilerplate code, as well as find some error in some code, and extending the functionality of some existing code. So with these technical tests, they're looking at the following things. First, your coding standard and style, if you're giving suitable variable and function names, following best practices, your critical thinking skills, your error checking, such as considering all different edge cases, and optimization. So how does your code performs in terms of big O notations? And if you know that you could improve, if you know how to analyze this and improve the code somehow. So no matter what happens, remember the interviewer's job is to try to push you to your limits and gauge how much you understand. And so often you'll feel like they are hard and you couldn't answer all the questions. And this is completely normal. And don't let it affect your confidence. Remember to stay open and friendly during the interview. And after the last technical test, they'll look at the results and decide if you'll get an offer or not. Next, we'll move on to managers. So there are many different types of manager in video game industry, and the names vary from company to company. I spoke with Masao, who had experience in the past as a project manager and is now a producer of his own studio. So managers are the one who make sure the games are delivered on time, within budget to an acceptable quality. They're the master of pulling everyone together and pushing everyone in the same direction by helping people work together. Depending on the studio, they can wear multiple hats, from tracking tasks and project completion times to hiring new employees to helping define pipelines. They're not directly involved in the development of the game, but they're an integral part of game development. Managers need to be able to communicate well, both orally and in writing, as their job involves talking with many people throughout the day and creating reports from data such as burn down charts. Compared to other disciplines, it is harder to gain experience by yourself since you need a team in order to learn management. So considering this, it is definitely helpful to get some training from formal education such as a HR or product management degree. Also, it's helpful getting certification in tools. So for example, Jira and Scrum is great because these are used very often in many companies. However, previous experience from non-industry game industry company can also replace these certificates, as there are many non-game companies that have started to use Jira and Scrum. And lastly, they need to be able to break down big tasks into small tasks and enter them into ticket system for tracking. So if this sounds good to you, then read on. So the goal of the CV is to prove that you have the knowledge and experience to do the job. So anything you can put on the CV to determine that is a big plus. So the most obvious thing to do first is to list any of your qualifications and certifications, followed by your past experience, then any extracurricular activities that demonstrate your management skills. So for example, if you have organized an event for a student organization before, or created an esport club at a university and organized an event, all those are things that you could put in your CV to demonstrate your management skills. The idea is to demonstrate that you have the ability to get things done and to get other people to help you get things done. So the interview process for a manager is usually 1 to 2 interviews. You'll get some question about your CV, such as your qualifications and past experiences, such as what difficulties did you face and how did you overcome them. Then you'll most likely get presented with a hypothetical situation and be asked how you would handle that particular situation. For example, there is someone who is very important to the team and has specific knowledge, high output, but it's toxic. What do you do? Questions like these, there are a lot of different ways to handle. Do you fire this person? Do you get the team to put up with it? There's no right answer, since the right answer really depends on the company culture and the person interviewing you. So if that's the case, how should you handle it? Because there's no right answer. And from Masao's experience, he believes you should always be truthful to your own values and what you're comfortable with doing, because that is what the company would be expected for you to do should this situation arise. Other questions you could be asked are, for example, how do you go about creating a pipeline for a deliverable that 6 people have to touch before they deliver that assets? Or for a tracking system, make sure everyone's getting the right visibility and showing the various completion levels. Lastly, depending on the different studios and countries, processes will vary. One very interesting thing is in Japan, they make you take general knowledge tests to make sure you know the basics. So, general math tests, geography tests, English tests. So that's done for everyone. So it really depends on your country and the company you're interviewing for, which you'll just know from experience after handling a lot of different interviews. So after these, the company will make a decision based on what they think your way of handling things is in line with how the company will handle things or not. So last but not least are testers. So here I spoke with my friend Chris about this role. So testers are the first line of defense against bugs and identifying problems within the game. They test game systems through different interaction and repetition. It has the easiest entry-level positions to get in and the most flexible career progression. It is possible to start from, for example, a tester entry-level position and switch roles to become a game designer, animator, project manager, or even a programmer internally. The difference between a tester role versus other role is that it doesn't require any formal training and previous experience, although it is a plus if you do have previous experiences. Testers, like all of the people who work in the video game industry, has to have a good amount of curiosity towards making video games, because you're going to be testing them 8 hours per day, 5 days a week. One of the main jobs of a tester is to identify bugs and log them. So they are required to have good written and communication skills. This is to make sure the bugs are logged with as much detail as possible and can be easily reproduced by the person fixing the bug. They're also required to write up test plans, which is pretty much a plan of how you are going to test the various different features of the game. Which brings me to my next point, which is experience in using bug logging tools such as Jira. It's important for a tester to know these tools and to have some experience with them, such as knowing how to search for a bug, submit a bug, and how to search for different information. Lastly, testers need to be patient in order to handle the repetitive nature of the job. They don't play through the game the whole day, whatever level or feature they like. They usually spend time checking for a bug within a specific system, feature by interacting with that feature or system repeatedly with different interactions. For example, testing if a player can get into a vehicle in Far Cry 6, you would have to test that the player can get into the vehicle from every single door, and can switch seat from every single other seat. And then repeat this process for every type of vehicle there is, which, for example, there are boats, planes, motorcycles, jet skis, etc. It is time consuming and repetitive, so you need to be prepared for that. So if you think being a tester is the right job for you, then here's what you need for your CV and for your interview. For your CV, you want to make sure to list any experience related to testing, such as testing for a friend's game or a final year's project. Apart from that, making sure you tick the boxes for all the skills required for a tester from the slide before. For a tester interview, you're likely to have 1 or 2 interviews. And these usually involve with the usual HR interview about your experiences, followed by another interview testing your ability on bug finding and your personality fit for the team. For the bug finding test, you could get a screenshot or video, and you need to write down all the bugs that you can find. For example, a image from Skyrim, there is 3 people sitting inside a house with a male NPC sitting outside. Here the bug is obvious, that the NPC outside is out of place. An answer that you could say is there's an NPC sitting outside. But a better answer would be in more detail and more descriptive. Something like, there's an NPC that should be sitting in the dinner table inside, but he's sitting outside without a chair, so he's floating mid-air. The key is to be as thorough as you can and as descriptive as you can. As if you're talking to a baby. These tests are designed to test if you're able to identify bugs from non-bugs, and how well you can write a bug report. And afterwards, a decision is made to give you an offer or not. So here are some other general tips, that can apply to any of the disciplines. So for example, general writing CV tips: keep it short and concise, no more than 2 pages. If you're just getting out of university, 1 page is probably enough. Make sure all the experiences and everything you put in your CV is related to what the role needs. So don't put anything like, I like to play basketball, or I play the piano, or I like watching anime, if it doesn't relate to what the role needs. Having references also really helps. So if you know of anyone in that particular company that you want to get in, having them pass the CV on is a big plus, and really gives you that edge in getting hired. If you don't have that, having a cover letter goes a long way, and it shows your passion, your intention, your personality. So always write a cover letter if you can. And lastly, customize your CVs and cover letters or portfolio for every company and position. You want to make sure that you are using the same terminology that is used in the advertising, and try and write your CV and your cover letters and your portfolio towards what they're looking for. And some general interview tips: always demonstrate your passion for video games. When we see people with passion, we want to work with them, and that gives you a better chance of being hired. Always answer positively, but stay truthful. So if you don't know the answer to something, say I don't know, but follow up with, I'm keen to find out in my own time after the interview and learn about that particular thing. And remember, interview is for both ways. you might be interviewed by the company, but at the same time, you're interviewing the company to see if it's a good fit with your personality and how you would like to work. If you don't know the answer, it's not the end of the world, like I said before. Um, and do your research on the company, so you can find out as much as you can about how they work and what games they make. And lastly, remember, practice makes perfect. So you might not ace your first interview, but once you take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 interviews, you'll like to see a pattern with the questions and the things you get asked, and you'll get better at it. So lastly, any questions and some extra resources for anyone interested. So some channels on YouTube and animation books. And if you would like some help in the job application process and preparation, you can check out Starreach Coaching. It's a business that I've started because I remember when I first started looking for a job fresh out of university, it was tough. I didn't know where to find information, how to structure my CV, how to prepare for interviews. And that is the exact reason that I wanted to start a business like this, is to help you guys to avoid the same trial and error process that I went through, and to find out how to properly lay out your CV, writing, and how to prepare for an interview. So yeah, if you're interested, feel free to contact me through the website. Thank you.